Hello to everybody out there in YouTube land. This is Jerry. Today is the 15th of February 2020. Um, this has been something that I wanted to testify. There's a sister in Christ out there that knows I wanted to testify this to her. The Lord determines our steps even though we make our plans. That's a proverb. Um, it's going to sound like a drunk log, and in a way it kind of is. It's like an AA meeting coming at you, but the message, I hope, is clear. um, some time ago in the late 1980s, I'm thinking 88 or 89. My head was so fuzzy back then, I don't even remember. I think I was about 18 or 19. I frequently played drums and hung out with a band that consistently used me as their go-to guy for beer, any kind of alcohol, because I was getting served by the time I was 17, and I had a fake ID, and I used that ID, in bars and in various liquor stores here in Trenton, in Lawrence area, Hamilton, and I got away with it. And I couldn't believe it because it wasn't even a state sanctioned ID. Okay, regardless, I too used these people as well, because as drug users and alcoholics, we try to find each other so that when I don't have, you do, you can share with me. When you don't have and I do, I'll share with you. Not that we want to, but in order to, further our drunk logs and do what we need to do to get high, that's what we do. We use each other. And it was debilitating. It was not good. We enabled each other. So I too used the bass player's house where we would jam down his basement as a safe haven for my drinking and a lot of drug use. A lot of drug use and a lot of drinking. I had been a pothead and a drinker since I was 12. Okay, so I'm 6 or 7 years into this by this point. Gradually, I ventured into speed, cocaine, mescaline, and the big one was PCP. We smoked a lot of boat back then. And LSD was one of my new favorites, as well as a lot of the other guys. That was heavily used. It was quite abundant. We could get mescaline double barrel hits all the time, purples and orange sunshines, and not trying to glorify it. I'm just giving you the idea of what was around back in that era. LSD was a little harder to come across, but when you found it, you found it. Well, one Saturday night, our bass player, who loved tripping on acid, got this guy to come over to sell us hits the whole night. And I didn't see this until probably weeks later. When I told this story to people, I would shake, literally shake. And it took me a good 4 or 5 years not to shake because of this story, because I realized what happened. And this is where I'm coming across. This is actual testimony that God is there and He's looking out for His. The whole night was pure evil from the get-go. The pusher, the guy that came over with the acid, he looked and dressed like Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath. Now, I don't know how many people out there are rockers and they know who I'm talking about, but This guy's got a great big iron cross that he wears. I mean, there's so much bad about Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne and all. There's just so much. There's so much evil surrounding their music, and they were political this and political that. Yeah, well then how come they're always singing about death and demons and drug use? And I mean, anyway, the hits were four ways. Okay, and this is the first time ever I had even seen a four-way. Most of the time these things were tiny little dots that you put on your tongue, let it dissolve, and you trip for 7-8 hours or whatever. These were four ways. They were printed on postage stamps of Lady Liberty, whom I found out later on is modeled after the Babylonian goddess Ishtar. Okay, so right off the bat, we've got an evil-looking guy selling evil drugs that has an icon or an idol, of a Babylonian goddess. I had made a prior liquor store run that night and we had a full case of Bud Nips. That's 96 7-ounce bottles. And we split them up. And a kid that I hadn't seen since grade school, since CYO day camp, he was a little younger than me. I knew his brother, and I was actually friends with his brother. And I hadn't seen this kid in a long time. And well, he was there. Well, he turned out to be the one that would be channeling the evil spirit. I had written this down, just this part, and the rest is going to go from memory, and I'm going to try not to wander, but it went like this. This kid's name was Scott. At the time, I kind of remember a little bit that maybe in the past, because kids are cruel to each other, I got along great with his brother in day camp, but he was younger, and so when you're older, you tend to pick on kids and stuff. I'm not saying I bullied them or beat them up or anything, but maybe I might have said some things that weren't so nice. The other drummer, there were two of us basically, and they always favored him for whatever reason. Even though I had more talent, they favored him because he was a skinnier kid. He was a little bit younger than me. He had longer hair than me. It was, it was all about the look, the 80s rock music thing. Well, he's sitting on this amplifier, a few feet away, and he had brought his stereo system down there, and he had this tape of Joe Satriani, Surfing with the Alien. And he puts it in and he's playing it. And we're all just, we had already just done our hits. And I'm drinking a couple beers. I had maybe 2 or 3 of these little nips. They were only about this big. So I'm only about 3 of them deep. And I'm sitting in this swivel chair. And the chair that I usually sat in, this kid Scott was sitting in, straight in front of me. And there was a room full of people here. There was only one person in the entire room that was completely sober. He didn't do drugs, he didn't drink, nothing. He just wanted to hang out with us. He was kind of a nerdy kid, whatever. To this day, he's probably the straightest of us all. All right. Here's where it gets creepy. Suddenly, there's this hum starting to happen in my head. And I could feel that, the trip was coming on. And, I look around and some of the guys are getting the permanent smile and they can't stop smiling. And one of the dudes is doing the vapor trail thing. And wow, this is great. And Scott is just staring at me intensely, just staring, not saying a word, nothing. And he's sitting in this chair like this, just sitting there staring at me. And I didn't say anything to him. And again, my head is humming. I don't know what's going on. I only had a couple beers. And I light a cigarette and I'm sitting there and I'm taking a sip of the beer and I listen and I'm like listening to the music and this isn't Joe Satriani anymore. And I look over and the other drummer is sitting on the amplifier. He's still sitting there and he's like this. And he's rocking back and forth. He's, something's wrong. Something's not right, man. Something's not right. And I looked over and I was like, Jim, so what the hell are you playing, man? What are you playing? He says, Joe Satch, Surfing with the Alien. I said, that's not Surfing with the Alien. And I said, you don't hear that? If anybody out there is a rocker and you've listened to Metallica, Master of Puppets, the song, The Master of Puppets, at the very end of the song, there's a lot of hellish, demonic laughter. And it just goes on, and there's wails and squeals from the guitar. Ha 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 ha, all this music. And it fades out very quickly. Well, it just kept going and going and going. And Jim, again, he's still rocking back and forth with these. He stops the tape, he pulls it out, and he's like, it's Joe Satch. And he puts it back in and turns it on, and again, it's the same sounds. And my head is humming, and I look up, and here's Scott still staring at me. And immediately, without me even saying anything, I'm like, something's not right here. This guy was reading my thoughts. And I'm thinking to myself, this is impossible. There's no way you can be reading my thoughts. And he's like, you don't think so? Without saying anything. You don't think so? I know everything about you. I know all that you do. And you have no time to change, he says. It's here. It's the end. So he's a deceiving spirit. And he's lying to me. My greatest fear back then, was nuclear war. Now, on a Saturday, at the end of the month, in that particular neighborhood, they would test the fire alarms. It was like an air raid siren. They would test it at the Hamilton Volunteer Fire Company, and that was only a few blocks away. Now, didn't even occur to me that, and that's the furthest thing from my mind. What I'm concerned with right this second was this dude is trying to make it seem like he's reading my thoughts, and it's just impossible. Well, you know, we're going back and forth telepathically. We're going back and forth, almost in an argument. And I'm looking at him, and he goes, you don't believe me, do you? I can read everything you've got to say. You don't even have to say anything. And I was like, this is impossible. In my head, never said a word. I said, if you can truly hear my thoughts, I said, take your right hand and pass it in front of your face. And in that instant, he went right in front of his face. And I was like blown away. And I later realized that he had 3 circles on his hand. And off of these 3 circles had 3 little lines. 6, 6, 6 on his right hand. This kid did not have a tattoo of that on his hand. This is what I could see. He was using the drug against me to open up the spirit realm. Now, other than myself, the other drummer was the only person that was a believer in God. As far as I know, the bass player was an atheist, always had been, always professed to be an atheist. He didn't believe in God, he didn't believe in the devil, it's all BS, blah, 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 blah. Our guitar player wasn't there, so it was just the three of us, three of us that were there. Uh, Now, after he had done this, he sat back in his chair, and I saw his eyes, literally saw his eyes turn into swirls. They went, they were purple and black, and they swirled, and it was like looking into the abyss, and you could almost feel the evil emanating off of him. What also was very, very convincing was now he was not only just sitting there in his chair, he was actually sort of floating in his chair. And he was wearing this hat. And if you know what the Roman Catholic Church, what bishops wear, they have what's called a fish hat. If you turn it to the side, it looks like a fish's head, right? He's wearing one of these hats, but it's black. And it has a red upside down cross on it. Upside down cross on it. Red, it's black with red trim. And the cross that's upside down is red. And I'm freaking out. And he's just sitting there. And the laughter from the Master of Puppets is now emanating in my head from him. It's not even on anymore because the bass player had told him to turn this music off. I don't know what's going on with, maybe your tape got eaten up or something. It was very, very strange. This wasn't just coincidence. I got up off of my chair, and Scott keeps following me with his eyes. And I'm like, I'm going upstairs. I'm going to go take a leak. Something's not right. Before I could open the door from the basement to go upstairs, he looks at me and doesn't say it, but he looks at me and says, "Don't go jerking off while you're up there." And I'm like, because I'm not going to go into all of that. But that's what he says to me in my head. And he's laughing like it's... So I go upstairs and I'm freaking out. And I'm almost in tears. And now Jim comes upstairs too. And he's like, "What's going on, man? What the hell's going on down there?" And I said, "It's not right, dude. It's not right. It's not right." Now the bass player comes upstairs, and we're all congregating in the kitchen. It's me, Jim, and the bass player, and we're congregating in the kitchen. And he had shut the basement door, and he's like, "Is Scott doing something, man? Is Scott doing something? Is he giving you a bad trip?" And I said, "This is way beyond bad trip, man." I said, "This is way beyond bad trip." And he's like, "Well, if anything happens, we're going to take care of this. We're going to take care of this." I'm like, don't... I'm shaking at this point. I'm shaking because I'm scared. I don't know what the hell is going on. Suddenly, this door opens. All by itself, real slow. And me and Jim both look just a little bit. And if you've ever seen the movie Hellraiser, at the very end of the movie, there's this creature that's chasing the girl, Kirsty, I think her name was. It's chasing her. Wow, I'm running out of tape. I can't even believe it. I'm gonna have to make a second one on this.